I sold the house, by the way. The words hit like a slap. I was standing in the corner of a bustling conference room in Chicago, my phone pressed tightly to my ear, my heart thudding against my ribs. I had stepped out to take a quick call from my husband, well, now apparently ex-husband, expecting something normal. Maybe a "how's your meeting going?" or a half-hearted "don't forget to eat." But instead, I got that. "You what?" I asked, barely keeping my voice steady as I pushed open the door to the hallway. "Yeah," Mason said casually, like he was telling me the weather. "Tasha and I are moving in together, and we need something bigger. That place was too cramped anyway. I figured you wouldn't mind. You're always working." Tasha. So it was true. I had suspected for months. Mason's sudden late nights, the gym membership he never used before, the new cologne he claimed was a client gift. But to hear her name out loud, so shamelessly inserted into the conversation, like she belonged in my life, in our life, my stomach turned. "Mason," I said slowly, trying not to let my voice shake, "are you telling me you sold our home without even talking to me?" He laughed. "Oh, come on, Elle. You're the one who always said the house was just an asset. I took care of it. You should thank me." The audacity, the arrogance. For a moment, I couldn't even respond. I stood there in my navy suit, heels clicking against the marble floor as I walked blindly toward the nearest window, needing air, needing something solid. The house wasn't just a place we lived in. It was my sanctuary, the one thing I held on to when everything else felt like it was slipping through my fingers. But Mason didn't care. He never had. We'd been married 5 years, built that life in Seattle from scratch, painted the kitchen ourselves, argued over furniture, watched the first snow fall through those living room windows. And now, with one smug phone call, he'd torn it all down. I clenched my jaw, my fingers tightening around my phone. He thought he had blindsided me, that I'd crumble. But what Mason didn't know, what he never bothered to know, was that I wasn't the same woman he married, and he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. I stood there for a full minute after Mason hung up, just staring at the call screen, like it had personally insulted me. He sold the house to move in with Tasha, and he thought he could get away with it. I wasn't even angry yet. I was stunned, numb, but beneath the surface, something sharp began to twist in my chest, like a blade turning slowly. I took a shaky breath and pulled up the email from my lawyer, just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. There it was. Subject line: finalized, property title transfer, 100% ownership, L. Monroe. Weeks ago, after refinancing to get a better interest rate, my lawyer had suggested we transfer the deeds solely to my name, for streamlining purposes. Mason hadn't even blinked when I asked him to sign the documents. He never read fine print, never cared about paperwork. All he'd cared about was that the interest rate dropped enough to afford his new electric bike and weekend poker nights. He hadn't just underestimated me, he'd set himself up for failure. The house wasn't his to sell, not legally, not technically, not in any court that mattered. I could feel the heat rising in my chest as the shock gave way to something stronger: fire. He thought I'd panic, run around trying to find a place to sleep, maybe even crawl back to him, begging for a discussion. What he didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this long before he made that call, because deep down, I knew. The late nights, the passwords he kept changing, the phone turned upside down at dinner. He didn't just cheat on me with another woman. He'd been cheating on me with the idea of a better life without me. And now he thought he'd won. He hadn't, not even close. I called Jenna, my lawyer and oldest friend, before I even sat down. "You're not going to believe this," I said, pacing the hotel room like a woman with dynamite in her hands. "Mason says he sold the house." There was silence on the other end. Then, "He what?" "He thinks it was his to sell. He has no idea the deed is in my name." Jenna let out a low, dangerous laugh. "Then he just committed attempted fraud." I smiled for the first time that day. Exactly. By the time I stepped off the red-eye back into Seattle, my nerves were steel. No more shaking hands, No more second guessing. I had facts, I had legal standing, and most importantly, I had nothing left to lose. The city's cold morning air slapped me awake as I gripped my suitcase and dialed Jenna again. "What's next?" I asked. "We've already contacted the buyer's agent," she said, her voice crisp with focus. "The sale isn't just void, it's potentially criminal. The buyer's furious. They want their deposit back, and Mason could be on the hook for the entire loss." I smiled. Good, let the fallout begin. When I walked into the house later that afternoon, it still looked the same. Mason's shoes tossed by the door, his ridiculous LED gaming setup blinking like a circus in the living room. But everything felt different now. It wasn't his space anymore. It wasn't our space. It was mine. I pulled the deed from my file cabinet and laid it flat on the kitchen counter, waiting, because I knew Mason. The moment he got Jenna's letter, he'd come charging in like a bull in a china shop. Right on cue, the door slammed open less than an hour later. "What the hell is this?" he barked, waving the legal letter in his hand. "You're saying I can't sell the house? That's bullshit. I lived here too." I didn't flinch. I crossed my arms, stared him dead in the eye. "You signed away your rights when we refinanced Mason. You didn't read the paperwork, just like always. The deed's been in my name for 3 months. He stopped mid-breath. His face paled, then flushed crimson. "You tricked me." "No," I said coldly. I protected myself. He started pacing, fists clenched, muttering curses under his breath. "This can't be happening. I already made a deal. Tasha and I—" "Tasha," I snapped. "Tasha isn't stepping foot in this house. You're lucky I haven't called the cops." He stared at me, blinking fast, suddenly unsure. "Elle, please, let's talk. We can fix this." I walked to the door and opened it wide. "There's nothing left to fix. Take your things. You're out by midnight." He didn't move, so I said it again, lower this time, like a warning. "Out. By midnight." And for the first time since I met Mason Monroe, he had nothing to say. I didn't think Mason would be foolish enough to show his face again so soon. I was wrong. The next evening, just as I was finishing up some paperwork at the dining table, I heard the front door creak open. Then came the click of heels, high, expensive ones. Tasha. She strutted in like she owned the place, arm looped through Mason's, a smug smile on her lips as her gaze swept across the room. "So this is it," she said, her tone syrupy with condescension. Smaller than I imagined." I stood up slowly, heart pounding, but my face didn't flinch. "Actually," I said, my voice calm, "this is where Mason was staying. You, Tasha, won't be staying here at all." Her smile cracked. She turned to Mason, confused. "Wait, what's she talking about?" Mason shifted uncomfortably. "It's complicated. Don't listen to her." "Oh, it's not complicated," I cut in. "Mason tried to sell this house behind my back. But the deed, it's in my name. Has been for months. He didn't read the fine print. Again." Tasha blinked, lips parting. "But Mason said he sold the house. He said the money." She stopped herself mid-sentence. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God, you lied to me?" "Tasha, listen." "No, you listen," I snapped, stepping forward. "He forged a sale, took a deposit on a property he doesn't own, and now he's looking at possible fraud charges. So unless you want to be part of this mess, I'd suggest you walk out the same way you came in." Tasha's perfect composure shattered. She turned to Mason, fury in her voice. "You told me this was your house, that you had it handled." "I did. I thought, save it." Her voice was ice. She clutched her purse, took one last look at me, then at Mason. "I'm not ruining my credit score over your midlife crisis." And with that, she stormed out. Mason just stood there, the door slamming behind her, face pale, hands trembling. "Ella, please," he said, reaching out like I'd forgotten everything. I stepped back. "Don't. You threw me out the moment you made that call. You didn't just betray me, Mason. You tried to ruin me, but you didn't break me. You freed me." He sank onto the couch, defeated. And for the first time, I felt nothing, just peace. Mason hadn't moved from the couch in over 10 minutes. He just sat there, head in his hands, as if by some miracle I'd changed my mind. As if everything he did, the lies, the betrayal, the audacity, could be erased with a sad pair of eyes and a pitiful apology. I wasn't that woman anymore. I walked to the kitchen counter and picked up the manila folder I'd left there that morning. I set it on the coffee table in front of him. Firm, final. "That's the divorce paperwork," I said. "Jenna's already drawn it up. All you need to do is sign." Mason looked up, face pale and almost childlike in its confusion. "You really hate me that much?" I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Hate you? No, Mason. I pity you." His mouth opened, but I didn't give him the chance. "You had a woman who loved you, a home we built together, and you threw it all away for a fantasy. You gambled everything and lost." I took a deep breath, steadying the rush of emotions in my chest. "I want you out by tomorrow morning. I've given you more grace than you deserve. That ends now." He stood slowly, eyes glassy. I made a mistake. Tasha's gone. We can fix this." "No, we can't." My voice didn't rise, but it cut like glass. "Because I've already fixed it. By removing you from my life." He stared at me, then at the folder. Something in his posture crumpled. Without another word, he picked it up and walked to the guest room. What used to be his office. I didn't stop him. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a fleece blanket, sipping tea as the house around me exhaled. Finally quiet, finally free. By noon the next day, Mason was gone. No final speech, no dramatic exit, just silence and an empty driveway. I opened the windows, letting the spring breeze sweep through the rooms. I boxed up the last of his junk, his hideous coffee mugs, his old gaming headset, that ridiculous framed poker chip he once hung in the hallway, and left them by the door for a pickup he'd never schedule. Then I stood in the middle of the living room and let the moment settle. This was my home now, not because I won a fight, but because I finally chose me. 3 weeks later, the divorce was finalized. There was no courtroom showdown, no dramatic objections, just a clean, precise signature on paper Mason couldn't afford to argue with. Jenna made sure of that. With the fraudulent sale attempt, the voided contract, and zero claim to the house, he had no leverage left. He signed, quietly, defeated. I received the confirmation email while sitting at my favorite cafe down the street, sunlight pouring through the windows. The subject line read, "Finalized Decree of Divorce." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, letting the words sink in. Then I exhaled, slow, deliberate, and full of something I hadn't felt in years, relief. It wasn't just a legal status. It was a declaration. I was free, free from the manipulation, free from walking on eggshells, free from a man who'd rather destroy everything than admit he was wrong. I went home that afternoon and threw myself into reclaiming the apartment, not with flashy renovations, but with small, intentional choices. I replaced Mason's heavy blackout curtains with sheer linen ones that let in the morning sun. I ordered a bold, abstract painting for the hallway, the one he always said was too loud. I donated the hideous bar stools he insisted on keeping and bought a cozy reading chair instead. Every corner of the space slowly transformed, not just physically, but emotionally. The air felt lighter. The silence wasn't suffocating anymore. It was peaceful. One night, Jenna came over with a bottle of champagne. "To you," she said, clinking her glass against mine, "and to never letting anyone dull your shine again." I smiled, heart warm. To fresh starts. Later that week, as I sat by the window with a book and a cup of tea, I thought about that first phone call, Mason's smug voice, his laugh, his certainty that he'd broken me, but he hadn't. He had, without knowing it, pushed me toward the most important version of myself, one who no longer begged for love, approval, or space in her own life. I glanced around the apartment, my apartment, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Pride. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. This was the beginning of everything else. and I was finally, beautifully, whole. Ella's story isn't just a tale of betrayal and revenge. It's a powerful reminder of the value of clarity, preparedness, and self-respect in any relationship. Ella didn't crumble when she discovered the betrayal. She responded with calm, intelligence, and careful preparation. While her husband underestimated her, dismissed her voice, and tried to take everything she built, Ella turned silence into strategy. She didn't just reclaim her home, she reclaimed her autonomy. The lesson here is clear. Know exactly where you stand in any relationship, especially when love and assets intertwine. Trust doesn't mean letting your guard down. Loving someone doesn't mean abandoning your boundaries. In fact, the deeper the relationship, the more essential it is to maintain your own foundation, emotionally, financially, and legally. This story resonates with anyone seeking independence, healing from emotional wounds, or who has ever been underestimated in their own home. Whether you're a strong woman, someone navigating divorce, or simply a person who loves deeply, remember, kindness and silence don't always save a relationship, but clarity and boundaries will always save you. And when someone tries to break you with betrayal, you can rebuild, stronger, wiser, and more beautiful than before, without needing anyone's permission to rise. If you enjoy deep, emotional, and meaningful stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new update. Your support is the motivation that drives us to keep bringing you powerful stories. Once again, thank you for being here, and see you in the next story.